All right. Well, welcome back to episode 3 of the Collecting the Precious podcast. Yes, it has been a little bit since we did the last one, holidays and all that good stuff. As you can see, we have Ben back. We managed to wrangle him from his family for just a little bit. We stole him. We promise we'll send them money here shortly. Jim makes more money than I do, so I'm a school teacher. So Jim carries all the big load in this particular production. So tonight we want to talk about something. A couple of subjects that, you know, when you're collecting, you have to think about, you know, how many of a piece is going to be made. Do you want to spend your money on it? How does that impact your value and you know, your value to your dollar and long-term investment, if you want to look at it that way, with edition sizes, prices, and value. And obviously those can be quite subjective, minus the edition size, I guess. So it's one of those scenarios where I thought it'd be interesting to talk about here with you guys, the fans that are watching this, in the comment section and stuff, and have us talk about it here, and kind of get people's thoughts on where you fall when something's announced. How do you judge whether or not it's worth spending your money on? Because obviously, it's a situation where when you're having to plunk down a few dollars on a statue that you have to sit and think about it with all the bills that people have and the economy being the way it is in the world and everything. So you have to really think about stuff. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about some of the different pieces that have come out. I made notes as a school teacher. I tend to do that. That's
what's the lesson plan, Josh?
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote down some stuff, a few statues from Sideshow Weta, when Sideshow and Weta were working together, Weta themselves, and kind of a newcomer to Lord of the Rings statues. Not a newcomer to statue making if you follow statue collecting, but Prime One is new to Lord of the Rings, and they haven't done anything from The Hobbit yet, but they've done Lord of the Rings. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about those and kind of compare over the ages, so to speak. Where prices were, how the value is looked at differently based on like when a statue came out versus maybe a statue now. Do we judge? And I do think I personally think this is the case. I think we judge Weta a little bit differently versus say like Prime One. And so just kind of spitball and talk and like we do and go over a few of these things. So when you're talking about edition sizes for, ES, that is a term that gets used, edition size, for those that might be new to statue collecting. Those are the announced numbers that are made. There's, of course, APs, which are artist proofs. And then you have some statues that are open editions or OEs. Open editions are limited. They're not like an action figure that you would find at Walmart or Target or wherever. They are limited, but they also don't have an announced edition size. So it's, the Weta or whoever's making it will produce them until their numbers say, hey, we need to stop. They're not selling as well or whatever. And so, that can mean in some instances thousands made. Or you can have a piece like some of the early Sideshow Weta statues with Sam and Bill, we talked about before, the Strider statue. Those are both open editions, but very low. I one time, I think I said maybe on the first podcast, that I knew the number at one time, but I don't now. But I know like Sam and Bill is super low. It's definitely less than, I want to say it's less than 500 or so, because at the time when those came out, the Lord of the Rings movies were just getting going and things, those statues didn't really take off till the Gollum DVD came out with the extended Two Towers. So and the prices have changed a lot over the years as well. So I thought it'd be kind of fun, long-winded, to talk about those and hear your guys's POV on where you think, on those particular topics, because like I said, they're outside of an edition size number. The view on them is very subjective. I mean, if you go to And I'll pimp them, so to speak, the Flame of Undoom message board. And anytime a statue gets announced, the varying opinion on an edition size and its price can vary greatly depending on who's posting. I mean, you can have a statue that comes out at, an edition size of, let me see here, what was one that was not too terrible. Like the Saruman on Throne from Weta that was announced just towards the end of last year. Its edition size is 703. And its the price tag was $1,400 or $1,399, something like that. But to me, 703 wasn't that bad. That's that's a low edition size. Really, considering when you have to look at all the collectors and stuff out there. But there were people on there that were like, that edition size is too high. And maybe some of it correlated to that the price tag was $1,400. To me, like I said, so to me, I think edition sizes and price and value and all that kind of thing is subjective. So, I mean, how do you guys look at that?
That's an interesting thing. And that Saruman on the Throne piece and several other recent pieces and edition sizes are illustrative, because as you think about edition size and whatever's going on the chat boards, there are a couple of dynamics at least at play. There's kind of the investor dynamic, which is I want to buy something and I'll probably hold it. I might enjoy it. But then again, I might not even take it out of the box. I'm going to hold it and I'm going to resell it at some point because I think this will be a collectible that others will be very interested in once this edition is sold out. And so that's kind of the investor mindset. That's not my mindset, by the way. The other mindset that goes on edition size is how fast do I have to act if this is a limited edition, so that I can get it at a reasonable, whatever reasonable is, at a list price, as opposed to an aftermarket potentially bumped up price because of demand. It's the same thing that you go through if you're buying a Super Bowl ticket or whatever it is. It's like, can I even get access to the Masters? And if so, how much is it going to cost me? And do I have an inside track anywhere that I could get it at list price or not? And so Weta's interesting innovation over a lot of the recent kind of limited editions has been to have an open order season, which sets the edition size, and then they close it. And so I think that was the case with Saruman on his throne. It was the case with the Bilbo in his study. So
Argonath was that way too.
Yeah, it was the case with the Minas Morgul environment. So there you just have a window, and whoever wants it. So for someone like me who's looking at it and saying, that's a piece that I want, and I'm willing to pay whatever it is that Weta or whomever is asking for it, then that takes some of the pressure off, although it could end up elevating the edition size, which would tick off the investor types.
Right.
Because they would like it to be 300. Because if they can grab that, then it's really going to be, potentially quite valuable down the road. And so that's kind of the dynamic that you're facing. And your mindset as a collector comes into play as far as how fast you need to act and do you want to get in on that action. But Ben's a collector too. I don't know. What's your mindset?
Well, I think you guys covered a lot of the good points on it. I think that anything under like 500 is probably pretty safe to say that it's going to hold its value. We're starting to see much bigger edition sizes now, with with Weta's re-engineered program of the open window, like you were speaking of. And obviously there's a lot more people getting involved in this. I mean, we're going from 4 to 5 to 600 edition sizes all the way up to almost 2,000 with the Argonaut. So, I mean, things are changing pretty quickly here. And not only that, there's so many different sizes. I mean, now we're sitting at essentially a cheap statue is $1,000 now. And, we're going up to $3,000 to $5,000 on the upper end, which, it's a whole different world of collecting we're entering into now. And with that being said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the resale value of all the older pieces, and how high they're going to go. Because if $1,000 is the cheapest one, I mean, people are going to be willing to spend that on a lot of the older stuff that was obviously much cheaper for people that got it initially.
Oh yeah. Well, and like, um, well, you had the Aragorn at Amon Hen statue a couple years ago. I guess maybe it's been now. Um, that what did the edition size on
It was
that?
400.
Yeah, 400. It was 449, which I thought was pretty fair, to be honest with you. Um, and it sold out like in the early bird before for the newsletter people. Like if you were signed up for the newsletter and their notification, it sold out then. It didn't even make it to the open market, so to speak. And you had a lot of collectors. I mean, why I'll say it like this because it's hard to judge when you're a message board. The message board people were always the most vocal people. Um, whether or not it's something good or it's bad. I mean, like if there's a few pieces that come in with a problem, and people are talking about that there's a problem, it looks like every piece has this problem because it's we're only paying attention. We don't know how many people got statues that aren't on message boards that are collecting that just like them. So but there were a fair number of collectors on message boards, Facebook groups, stuff like that I saw that were upset that they didn't get a chance. So Weta said, yeah, we're going to go to this timed order. And I get why that makes some collectors mad because they want to be able to know that it's a lower amount, maybe not necessarily just because they're investor collectors, but I think that they want to know that something has a small edition size. They want to be able to say they have a statue, even if they're not planning on selling it, that's only limited to 300-400 pieces, 500 pieces. There is a bit of they can go, I have this statue and it's only limited to 500 pieces. There's a bragging about it for some folks. And like the Argonath, it's got an like Ben said, it's 1885 the edition size, which is an odd number. But it's one of those pieces, there's a reason that it did that because that first one that came out sold out so fast it came back for just a second on some returns and stuff. I mean, that's how I got it. I missed it when it went up for originally. I got it when I was, it got the email. I was coming out from work one day after school was over with, got in my car, saw the email, and I'm literally ordering it from my phone in my car before I went home because I knew it wasn't going to make it.
That was that smaller Weta.
Uh-huh.
Got it. Yeah.
And so, when you're that thing was going for like, I'm sure it's still doing well. It was going for like $1,200-$1,300. I mean, it was like double, triple its value. So people were like, oh yeah, I ordered the bigger one because I love that statue. Am I going to sell my smaller one? Unlikely, but I really like that sequence. So I understand why people, went for it. I mean, it's $800. It's a big piece. Having talked to a few people that have seen it up close, and it's a pretty large environment, and it's just one of those kinds of things impact. So you have to look at when you're looking at modern stuff, edition sizes. Saruman was 703. Then you have pieces like the classic series that Weta has that are 350. They're open edition. So like I said at the beginning, it doesn't mean that it's, for those watching, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have an edition size. It just means that they're not going to announce it, that someday they'll just stop making it when the numbers tell them to stop making it. You have, if you're a collector, you have to decide, is the price worth buying a statue that isn't going to have it? You're never going to know what your number is. It's just and so you have to decide, do you want the piece because you want the piece because you like the movies? And decide, maybe if I sell it down the road, it might not be worth $349. That almost never happens. I mean, there's very few pieces, even of the newer stuff. And to be honest with you, when you do find it, God, I know that I like the Hobbit movies. I know that they have plenty of problems, and that's a podcast for another time. But those there are some in that particular area where, yeah, they've dipped below, and you know, unfortunately, that's just that film kind of got smacked around in that direction as far as collectibles. You got the Bilbo at Bag End, which was just a touch over 1,000, and 1,200, you know, almost $1,300. That's another one of those pieces that I remember seeing some people post, you know, that the edition size was too high, and I'm thinking, you know, for me personally, and I'll let you guys talk about this here in just a second. You know, when you see like a piece like that, that's basically just called 1,000. Yeah, it's $1,300. That's a lot of money, but it's a massive piece. There's a lot going on with it. Um, to me, that's not in a large edition size, because if you look at some of the stuff that, like the Ring Wraith on Steed, one of the most classic statues in the whole Lord of the Rings line over the last 20 years. Its edition size is 5K. And that piece goes for, I mean, it sold originally for 275. I think it was 275, 250. And it sells for at least double, if not triple that, even still. So to me, you know, the stuff at the end of the Lord of the Rings line, you had Sauron that had an listed edition size of 5K. The Morgul Lord was like 95K or vice versa. You know, so to me, 1,000 just isn't big. Now, if they were producing, and this is, like I said, this is where it's all subjective. This is why I want you guys to chime in just a second. If Bilbo was $1,300 and he had an edition size of 5,000, that to me is where you start to get into
Which Bilbo are you talking? The full
the full one. You know, if that full one where you get a good chunk of Bag End and you get Bilbo and his desk and all that kind of stuff, if that had an edition size of 5,000 pieces, at that price, then I think you get to look into, does the value and the price and everything in the edition size line up? Because I mean, 5,000 pieces that is a fairly healthy edition size. So we're on a piece like that. Where do you guys kind of fall? Because I mean, it's not a cheap product, as far as that goes. Is that kind of an edition size on something like that too big to you guys? Is it, or should it have been lower? Because that was the one they did a window. I mean, is that so? Where do you guys come down on that particular that kind of a piece when we're talking $1,200-$1,300?
Ben, what do you think?
I mean, I think that statue's, you know, like you said, it's a pretty substantial piece. And I mean, obviously when you're buying that piece initially, you have no idea because of how they do it. So, I mean, like you said, I mean, 1,000 isn't too crazy when you look at it, like compare it to the collector's edition Bag End, which was 1,111 pieces.
Right.
And that's a similar size. Obviously it has, you know, the uniqueness of the back end, so you can look into the rooms. Well, I think that was initially $199, right? I think it was
Something like that. Yeah, that seems.
because it came out when the original Argonath and the Prancing Pony came out in like 2010 or 2011.
Yeah.
And I mean, those regularly sell for $750 to $1,000, and that's a similar edition size. You know, obviously it's the same, you know, depiction. Obviously it's done differently, but I think, you know, it's probably going to go up in value because it'll be especially those that collect the Hobbit holes. You know, it's to the scale of the Hobbit holes when the original Bag End is not. So if you are deeply into collecting those, it'll be a piece you definitely want to have. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors I think that go into it. And, you know, and it wasn't like, you know, like the Argonath, the new one is essentially the exact same as the original, but bigger.
Yeah.
So that's going to hurt the value of the original one, in my opinion. Like,
unless there's this component of the original that it becomes, well, it's super special and kind of rare, and you know, it's kind of like a Honus Wagner baseball card. You know, it's like there's just not a lot of them, and that's the difference between this kind of collect an investment idea versus collect because I think this is a really cool scene and I just want to be able to look at it whenever I want to look at it. And so depending on your mentality, and that can change. You can go onto the trader boards and people decide, you know what, my collection is too big. I need to make some room, and I'm going to try to clear out some space on the stuff that is less interesting to me now. And then all of a sudden, I am interested in edition sizes and I am interested in aftermarket prices. And it's just the supply and demand equation. It's basic economics. And if that supply side is A, small, and B, they're not making any more of it, it's kind of like buying Manhattan real estate or something. It's going to raise in price and that'll be cool. But for those of us who are just holding because we love the stuff, less significant, at least right now.
Well, I think that's the thing too that you just said, is that I think the collectors who collect with investment in mind, in a sense, it's part of the equation. They're already thinking about, if I sell the piece down the road. I just think that that's part of their equation. And I could be wrong. And if
That's
you're
right.
watching this on the message boards, please tell me, where you come down. And if you're reading this, if you're seeing this in the comments section, please tell me.
Yeah, and that's definitely
if that's not part of the equation. I just think that the math works for them in a differently, where other collectors, are buying it, they're thinking about as far as like, how much does this hurt my budget right now? Or if you're making payments, how does that impact your budget monthly? And
yeah, that's the other thing.
You're not buying it with the intention to sell. But when you do sell, then you do start checking eBay for completed sales and getting an idea of its price and stuff like that. And I want to say price because I want to make sure I don't say value, because I want to talk about, like, value is a different term than price. Price is what you're willing to pay out of pocket. Value, where I think value is a subjective term, is, I guess for me, I go into like Walmart or Target, although with COVID and obviously not as much anymore, but you go through the action figure line, because I still like to go and look and just see what's out there and stuff. And I've got a couple of nephews that will eventually be into wanting action figures probably and stuff like that. So I look at the prices of them. I see they're like $10, $20, $25 or whatever. I'm going, there is no way I'm paying $25 or $15 or whatever it is for this action figure. But I happily bought, of the ones that I listed, Saruman, Ringwraith. I bought almost every single one of the ones I listed. Actually, the only one of the ones I have listed on here that I didn't buy was Saruman. All the others I bought. Well, I don't have the Ringwraith Classic. I'm sorry, I don't have that one. So, but Bilbo was $1,299 before shipping and stuff. So, I mean, I'll happily pay $1,300 for a statue, but don't pay $20 for an action figure at like Target. And I think that that's where value is subjective. And I'm curious where you guys feel about value. Because, like I said, to me, there are plenty of people that buy action figures. And Ben, you started out buying and doing action figures with the Toy Biz stuff. I mean, there's a lot of value in those now because they're long sold out and that kind of thing. But when you're looking at that kind of stuff initially, when it's going, and you look at a Transformer or something like that, it's $20. I'm like, no. But because it's just, to me there's no, even though I love Transformers growing up and I still love Transformers now, really, I just don't see the value in buying an action figure. It just doesn't do anything for me. That's not the type of collector that I am. Where do you guys come down on value, or how do you guys view value? Because I think people use that term on message boards incorrectly, and sometimes state it in a way where it's like it's a definitive, this has no value. No, that's your view on value. And I think collectors, myself included, have to be careful in stating something and not writing it in a way where it's clearly an opinion and not a statement of fact. And that goes into whole other topics too, as far as internet and everything. But
the thing about
have different views on a value of the original Balrog statue, and that kind of stuff. So where do you guys come down on value? I mean, how do you guys view that?
Well, it's when you think about price of anything, it is a conversation about relative value.
Right.
So I'm going to sell you something, and I have a sense for what I value that as. And if I'm a manufacturing company or from an artist, this is a very interesting question as it relates to those who are creating original art. because, you know, in that sense, and I've got one of those guys. Some of my Tolkien maps. Um, the artist is now living in my basement. We've had some very interesting conversations about this because of the conversation that he has with those who are commissioning his work.
Mhm.
And there are those that are coming at it and they have a budget, and that's their value. How much can you give me for this much money? Others have something in mind, and when they find out how much it's going to take to, how much that costs, it's like, well, that's just crazy. There's no way I'm paying that much. And so I'm having a value conversation that's rooted in a very individualist sense for whether or not this is something that I'm willing to put my money down. That's also related to, how much free cash do you have? And so for somebody who's just, making boatloads of money, you're a doctor or whatever, I'm willing to, I just gonna buy what I want versus you just going to eat ramen for the next 27 years because you've seen something that you've really got to have in your collection.
Right.
So it's a very different kind of a value equation that's going on, particularly when it gets into this transaction mindset. So I got something, I'm willing to part with it. Do you want it? And that's where, well, how rare is it? Which is really, is there anybody else I could find that might sell it to me cheaper? That perpetual, I'm going to keep searching eBay for the bigger fool who has something out there that I know is valuable, but they may not, and I'm gonna nab it. It's the story of finding a miracle find in this weird little independent bookstore or so it's a very personal equation, but
Right.
it's also rooted in a supply demand thing, which really does lay on top of how much of this is available and how much are others seeking it, which then will raise up the available price. It's why those edition sizes, for somebody who says I can't afford this now but I really want it, how much is this going to cost me down the road when I have to go to the aftermarket? For them, they say, give me the biggest edition size possible because then I got a shot at getting it at a reasonable price.
Right.
But if it's really low, then I got to say, well, am I willing to eat ramen for 40 years? Because I don't think I'm going to ever get a shot at it. So.
Right. Ben, where do you come down like on value, or how do you feel about the term value?
I think Jim pretty much hit it on the head with what he was saying about, the last statement on just, depending on how much money you have is a big factor in throwing down on these statues. And,
Mhm.
like he said, like, if I think it's too expensive now, I hope it's the biggest edition size in the world so that maybe down the road there'll be some luck of me finding it on eBay for some discount somewhere. And for those that can afford it up front, they're like, I hope they only make 7 of them. So like, there's got to be some level of happy medium between the two.
Right.
And I think Weta has really been coming up with a more perfect formula than them just saying, hey, we're going to make 400 and it sells out, like you said, from the early bird email, and then you have a fleet of people that are offended and upset about it. I think what they've come up with now is it helps everyone feel like they have the opportunity to get the piece, and they have payment plans, they have other options that really allow it to be open to more people.
Well, I think too, as far as price goes, I think that's a huge, what you just talked about with the payment plans, whether they do them, Sideshow does them. I think even Prime One does it. And we haven't talked about a couple of their stuff, and I want to talk about them in just a second. But that definitely helps when it comes to price, when people are thinking about whether or not I can get it now or not. Because like I did the payment plan on Bilbo, I stretched him out over 6 months, and every month it was a $200 payment. A couple months I think I had Weta dollars that helped out a little bit, so all I owe left now is whatever the shipping is. But you got to be careful doing that, because if you're not, you're paying for a massive statue every month if you do 2 or 3. So um, and still not, and you don't have anything to show for it for months on end. But that helps when it comes to price. But one thing I wanted to talk about with value too, before we, possibly, at least for a second or two, move on to other stuff, um, like a piece that I have in my collection, and Jim just got it recently because I sent him some information. You got it handy? Oh, there we go. Yeah, mine's downstairs in my stuff. Um,
The new Arkenstone.
and when I got mine, I think I've had mine for 10 years, close to. Um, I paid $550 ish for mine. Um, and I think, to me, having seen the one up close, because a friend of mine locally that collects, she has one, and I saw it, and it was just absolutely stunning, just a stunning piece.
It's
Um,
that's a good illustration, Josh, because that is a customized piece
mhm,
from a really high quality prop site.
mhm.
They can make another one, and the price is about the same.
Yeah.
Now, as when they might adjust it for materials or direct costs,
Right.
but it's not an aftermarket kind of thing. Same thing if you were going to order an app from my friend,
Right.
buckskin burned in and so on. It's going to be based on the number of hours, how complex it is, how big the map is, how much detail is in it, and so on. And so it's all about getting that customizable piece versus doing the aftermarket.
Right.
But my Lord of the Rings map from this guy, if you were going to go try to buy the version that he gave to Stephen Colbert, you'd probably pay more than what you pay for my map. And that's the oddities of this the value is
Right. Well, that's
whenever you see a book
with the book, with
the eyes of the beholder.
I mean, yeah, $550, that's not cheap, but the value, and this is why I say value and price is different. I paid $550 for it, not out of pocket. I'd sold a bunch of Star Wars stuff and Marvel stuff and cleared out that part of my collection, and so it didn't come out of pocket for those watching, but it was worth. Oh, I know. I've sat down and looked at that thing. Ben, if you don't have that book,
I have it. I love it.
do you have it? Okay. And it's the value on that piece, triple, quadruple to me personally. And that's why I say it's different. Somebody may have it and not think that highly of it. But for me personally, that is my favorite piece in my collection. I'm not saying the stuff that Weta's, that's not a shot at any of the other stuff I have, because the folks at Weta and the folks at Sideshow and stuff that have been involved with Lord of the Rings, they know what I think of them. They know what I think of the collectibles.
Well, and that's where
that piece is so amazing. I cannot put a price on it, what the value of that is, because if someone was to come to me and say, I want to buy that from you, you better have 3 times what I paid for it, 4 times what I paid for it if you want mine, because to me it's that level. And that's why, I mean, when I see people talk about like the Bilbo went back in, like, oh, I don't see the value in it, or they state it in a way where it comes across like it's a statement of fact, like that people we all, and I do it too, you have to be careful in stating opinion as fact, because you might not see the value in that piece, but there are other people that you're interacting with that do that have that value in it,
and that's just fine. If you don't see the value, don't buy it.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you do see the value, then figure out a way. Maybe it's a payment plan.
Right.
Maybe it's I can't do it now, and like Ben said, I'm just gonna hope that someday I'm gonna find a steal on eBay that'll get it. And I'm gonna be faithful and keep checking.
And sometimes you do get lucky. You have to find, the ring wraith on Steve that I bought to replace the one that I sold when I was going to get married several years ago. That's a story for Dr. Phil, not it was it clearly stated in the deal, and I may have even mentioned this to you guys before. I don't remember. One of the hooves, and it was a problem back then. What didn't want to fit on one of the pegs. It just in shipping and being in the car. All I did was when I got it, I took a wrench and I just kept wiggling and moving one of the pegs around, and I was able to get it to where it's flat. It doesn't affect anything. Now I can't sell it as mint, but I'm not looking to sell it anytime soon. But you wouldn't know. I paid way less than what good ones were going for that were perfect, or what people would consider good ones. Trying to think, I got the original Saruman statue. I think it was $150. It's an open edition size piece. I got a steal on it because I think maybe one of the fingers had a small crack on the side, one that you couldn't even see. It was one of those type things. Trying to think of some other pieces. So you can find good deals on those, and then it becomes, we have, if you have the ring Raython steed and I have the ring Raython steed, and we paid similar prices or whatever, is my value better than yours? Because it's, so that's what to me, I guess that's one of those little terms collecting wise that sometimes irritates me a little bit if you can't tell something, because it's like you have to be careful, I guess, like I said, when you're talking about value, because something like that red book may mean a lot to somebody. And so there's a value on it that can't be put into a number. And if you're like, oh, I don't see the value in that, or you state it in a way where it sounds like an opinion, you're not trying, that person is not meaning to be insulting. And to my friends in the flame that are watching this, that might, I don't want anybody to take this personal, because I'm not meaning it that way. But you have to be careful stating that, because there may be somebody that you're interacting with that piece means the world to. And you going, well, there's no value in that piece. Well, somebody obviously thinks there's some value in it, because they just spent, especially if you're, like any of these pieces now, you're, $800. Let's see. Saruman was $1,400. The classic series are $350. Bilbo was $1,300. Argonath was $800. The Doors of Durn was $500. It's an open edition size piece. Sauron was $1,000. The Cave Troll premium statue.
Here's another.
You're not cheap.
Let's go to the other end of the price point.
Okay.
And so you're just going to buy a pop figure.
Mm-hmm.
You spend $15, $20, whatever, depending on the box. Do you take it out of the box?
I don't.
And does that affect the value? And so as a collector, if you're going to hold it and try to maximize the potential resale value, you'll at least save the box, or you might not take it out of the box. But there are other collectors that will look at you and say, you are insane.
Oh yeah, action figure collectors are crazy that way.
Not take it out of the box. That's the big, so I've got all of these tubs, Lord of the Rings ducks. And, some of them have kind of filled up with water in the bottom because they're all out of the box and they're in my shower or around my bathroom, because that's where I want to experience them. Right. I don't want them stuck in my basement in a box. For me, that defeats the point. For others, that is the point.
Right.
And so, how does the fact that you bought something that's not mint, okay, or it might have a crack in a Smaug's wing, or I don't have the original box, or I don't have the shipping box that the original box came in, and all of those things get pulled into this value equation and a negotiation. So it says, well, if it's cracked, I'm not going to pay you net price for it. Or if it's not or if it's in the original box, then that ups the value in some collectors' minds. But if I'm just going to throw the box away, I really don't care. My wife gave me Dine on his war pig.
Okay.
And bought it from a spot, and they didn't have the original box, but they wrapped it up well enough to ship it in a way that it got here, and he's in beautiful display, and he's just doing fine. And I was glad that she was able to get it at a reduced price relative to if it was minted box from somebody unopened. So, and that's just that, and that's my collector's mindset, which is going to be different. It's probably different from some of your guys' collections. And it's certainly going to be different from, various people on message boards that are thinking about these things differently.
Right. Ben, I mean, with the fact that you started out obviously doing, the Toy Biz figures, did you keep those in the boxes when you first got them, or did you open them up and set up displays? I mean, I know friends of mine, because I used to go midnight rushing with friends of mine that collected Star Wars action figures, and we would go to Walmarts and Targets and stuff and wait for them to stock this stuff at midnight, which made us kind of look sad and sad and sad and sad. But it was fun. We had a good time with it. But how there was always the debate among those guys. Did you keep them in the box? Do you open them and set up something? And it was always just kind of, obviously because of like what Jim said, it varies from collector to collector. How did you handle the Toy Biz figures? And did you see a lot of that within that community when you were more focused on that?
Yeah, I think, Jim's right. There's people that are in one corner or the other. They're either fully committed to keeping it mint in the box, and if you open it, you're crazy. And then there's the other guys that are like, you're crazy if you keep it in the box because I want to utilize it and examine it. And I'm kind of in the middle with it because I had some that were out, like, the NECA, the large scale Balrog that lit up. Like, I mean, I had that thing in the corner.
Yeah.
That thing was cool to keep in the box.
Yeah.
But obviously some of the ones, and this comes into value too. Like, I started with action figures, which obviously is a much cheaper venue to start in.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some action figures that were relatively scarce that were like $400 or $500. And I remember thinking, like, there's no way I'm buying those. And then you break that threshold at some point. You're like, okay, if I'm going to continue on this collecting front, I got to get that piece, or my collection is not complete. And then you crest that point, and then you go further down the road, and you're like, man, dude, these polystone things, these things are insane. You see somebody's collection on YouTube, and you're like, how did this happen? How did this person acquire all these things? And there's no way you could ever do it. And then all of a sudden, you buy one, and then it takes time to break the mind down, to respect, understand the value, because we have limits to it. Like, if you'd asked me before I started collecting this, if I would spend $3,000 on a statue, I'd be like, absolutely not. And I mean, I've spent $3,000 on multiple statues now. And, there's some people that think I'm nuts, but, I'm doing it on the regular now. Right. So maybe I am insane, but I love it. But it took a long time to get to that point where the value in me seeing that, and understanding that comes from, a long time of, pushing myself away from that decision.
Right. And I'm glad you started talking, because I was going to interject for a second and ask you like what you had just finished up talking about, how you kind of, how you viewed prices of action figures, some of the more expensive ones, during that run. And then as you transitioned over, how you viewed the price differently as you did that, because I think that's perfect. Grant, I've owned the original Balrog twice. First time I paid $2,200 for it. Second time I paid like $1,100 or $1,200 for it. So I kind of broke that line a long time ago. But even still, actually, to be honest with you, in some ways, until I'm trying to think, what was it? It might have even been right up until like Thranduil on Elk. That was like close to 1,000, or Azog on Warg. That was like, it was close to, it was like $800 or something. Yeah. That was when I finally kind of got to that point where I was like, started going, some of these statues, I'm going to have to cross this line that I said I wouldn't cross. And now, like I said, the Cave Troll was $1,200, and Bilbo on back end was $1,300. Sauron was $1,000. And so, I've crossed that line. Now, I haven't crossed the line of the Master Collection series like you guys. I haven't gone to that road yet. I still get to that door and I get cold feet. But like I told you, if Weta ever announces something like what we talked about, good night, nurse, I'm done. But
As a Doom in a master collection.
Yeah, at that point, I'm pushing all the chips in the middle. But yeah, I do think that that's the thing too. Is when it comes to price and value that, um, and not to take out edition size, but I think really edition size is one of those things like I think sometimes people use edition size it's almost to maybe sometimes talk themselves out of getting a piece
Mhm. Yeah,
because
that's it.
oh, it's got 1,000 pieces. I'm that's too many. And when really they're trying to figure out whether or not they can afford the money on the price
Yeah.
and where's the value fall. And so I think people will use edition size to kind of, like I said, talk themselves out of something as much as, or talk themselves into it. Oh, that piece is, man, that thing's $1,500. That's really expensive, but the edition size on it's only like 350 pieces. I don't know. What am I going to do? And then
That's where you go to your wife and
oh,
say,
you're done. I mean, at
it's an
that point,
investment, honey. It's
yeah,
only got 3 pieces. It's going to go up in value.
I just go to the bathroom and look in the mirror and talk to myself. That is one of the things about being single. I can just go, so self, do we want this? But no, I mean, but so to me, I think it's one of those things I do. I think you get to a line and again, I'll use myself. There are, as I've told you about some things that I've heard, um, that if certain pieces were to be announced down the road, certain characters that could be announced, if they're done as a master collection, yeah, at that point, yeah, I'm going to cross that line. So I've already mentally, like Ben was talking about, I'm already working on myself. I'm already going rounds in my head in a boxing match, setting it up and getting myself ready. And I think that that's part of it. I think people just have to get used to um, where things are going. But as far as price, I think where price plays into that is you have to be able to understand too somewhat economics where things are going. Years ago, I got myself in a bit of hot water on before when the Flame of Undune was originally, what was I can't remember the original name. Um, Somebody on the message board is going to sit there and go, "Long, you should know this already." Uh, but I got myself in some hot water and put in timeout um, because Sideshow had announced their solo Lord of the Rings line, and um, it was the prices on it were like 250, 275, something like that, 300 for those pieces. And people were freaking out. I mean, they were like, "Oh, this is so ridiculous." There's again the value price topic came up again, as it always does. And um, it was a situation where I'm like, just reading and reading and reading and I, interjected my opinion and kept kind of going and stuff. And me and the guy who ran the message board already weren't necessarily what you would call friends. And so he was of the mindset that they were way overvalued, the price was ridiculous, yada yada yada, because they weren't charging 125 that the original Lord of the Rings statues were being charged for, like Strider and the Elrond and some of those, pardon me, that were 125. Of course, this is, that the Sideshow Weta lines ended. This is like 2 or 3 years later. So we're talking, 3 to 5 years probably after that partnership had ended. Prices on everything had changed over that time period. And you see a little bit of it now from time to time, especially from collectors who have been around a while. Well, why isn't this the same price that such and such statue that's of similar size was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago? There's a lot of factors. China, the price of pay the workers in China, transport, all that kind of stuff, and so those affect prices, and that's where price can get subjective in a lot of ways. Is that depending on how you're looking at all the things that factor into it. Now, some people, obviously will say, "Oh, you're just making excuses for why the price is what it is." Um, for me personally, I just try to look at it from an economics perspective, um, and how all the things that go into it. Do I think $1,300 for Bilbo on Bag End is expensive? Yes, I do. Um, I would never ever say, "Oh, this is cheap," whatever. But I also know all the things that go into producing it from Weta's perspective, understand the manufacturing costs and all those kinds of things. So I think you have to look at it from that perspective, and then get into, what's the edition size, and then obviously then you get into a value. So as far as, when you guys look at price, how do you, with price, like I said, having some subjective things to it, how do you guys view price? I mean, when do you guys factor in, from like a perspective similar to mine, where you look at all the worldly factors that come into play? Or do you view this just strictly and look at the piece and just go, there's a lot going on, it's big, it's got a lot of detail, and that's strictly how you base the price? Or do you compare it to other pieces in the line and say, well, this piece came out 3 years ago, it should be pretty similar to this price? How do you guys view price as far as a potential subjective, factor?
Well, my first cut at price is, do I want this piece?
Mm-hmm.
And there are some pieces, and it will vary. I mean, it's a very personal decision, where you might conclude, I'm going to get this no matter what it costs. So we talked about that a little bit in our last session, where we talked about motivations as collectors, and because at some level, no matter what the price is, you can spend all of your money on Lord of the Rings collectibles if you want to.
Oh yeah.
There is that much stuff, and it keeps coming out. So you can stop eating and live in your car if you want to. You just won't have any place to display it. So you got to decide, first of all, what it is that you want.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to then ask the question, what is affordable or not? And that's where it gets hard, because there could be a piece like your Bilbo at Bag End, as an example, where you look at it and says, that's really expensive. But it's a balanced thing. We wants it, we needs it. And so is it at that level? Or honestly, it probably is helpful for you to have someone else, even if it's looking at yourself in the mirror, that says, do we really want it? Do we really need it?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that will influence. I mean, this is a classic negotiation tactic, by the way. If you're trying to negotiate, a car price, or a deal in business, I heard one guy say, you have to really, really, really want it, but not too much. And that dynamic is one of saying, yeah, identify what you really want, but candidly, you have to think about, this is your price point thing. What is beyond the pale? Now, and you'll constantly be bumping up against that. And if you start buying multiple $1,000 pieces, you might find yourself, way too deep in credit card debt, or too many of these, spread out pieces.
Who's done that? You can do that pretty easy, unfortunately.
What would Dave Ramsey do is part of that question. So, be sensible for it, be real clear about what you want. And then that's where it starts getting into edition sizes, and this is an investment piece. For a lot, that's just a rationale. It's a justification for, am I going to spend this or am I not going to spend this? There are true investors that say, I am going to spend this, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to sell it a year from now, and it's going to help me buy something that I really do want in my collection.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine too. So there's lots of different rationales for it. But at that price point, it really is a matter of desire and affordability for where I am right now. And look, face it, nobody must have a Lord of the Rings collectible like you need food to eat, or you got to pay for your lodging or transportation. So don't get confused about that. You can always say no.
Right.
But so it's a discretionary spending. Do you want to go to Disney World this year or buy Bilbo? Just think about what's valuable to you. What are your trade-offs for it?
Well, Bilbo won't give me COVID, so I'm going to take Bilbo. Ben, you've got obviously, as I said the last time you were on, it's one of the coolest collections I've ever seen. So you've obviously bought a lot of pieces, and they've ranged in price. How do you view price? Is it, like I said, how subjective is it to you? Or what do you take in certain factors like this, worldly factors, like why it costs that much, and so then it becomes to like what Jim was saying, like just really in some ways, how bad do you want this piece?
Yeah, I think majority of my collection, like 60 to 70%, was probably bought in the secondary market
Mm,
because I was
That's
late
fast.
to the game on a lot of the things, like
right.
all the sideshow Weta pieces, and then a majority of the other pieces I just had to catch up because I was behind.
Hmm.
Um, so I've learned to deal with that. Obviously, you see some pieces just skyrocket right out the gate, and then some slowly. But a lot of things I would do is to kind of mitigate the costs is buying like larger collections,
Uh-huh.
and then either trading or selling off pieces I don't need to try to to eliminate some of the burden of the costs. Because I mean, as you well know, it's the deeper we go, the more expensive this becomes. And I mean, there's just so many things now. And I mean, now it's like, I mean, you go back 2 years ago, you could probably collect everything that was coming out for $5,000 or $6,000.
Hmm.
Like everything from Weta, everything that was, because it wasn't a lot. Like after the Hobbit movies ended, and then until like this year. I mean, Weta alone this year put out about $10,000 worth of stuff themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean like I
And
said,
I mean, that's wild though. And then you
So
got Prime One. Like you're talking, to keep up with everything, you're probably looking at like $30,000 to $50,000,
Mhm.
which is
so
not
Ben,
possible.
I have two questions to follow up on what you said. First of all, have you, as you, because that 70% of the secondary market is fascinating to me. Have you seen things that ramped up quickly but then came back to a more reasonable price? And the second question is, it is fascinating that you're talking about buying collections and then and separating those collections and selling off pieces that you're less interested in as a way to pay for or at least offset the overall cost. So I'm curious whether is it possible to even break even that way? In other words, buy a collection and sell off of enough of it that it kind of pays for itself. I,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
definitely. I mean, I bought, collections ranging from a couple $100 to $25,000. So, some of these bigger collections, I hadn't a need for all the pieces. So, I would, move them on through eBay or through other,
Yeah,
other medians. And then, keeping obvious, if I didn't have the piece, I kept it though. Like I,
right.
my collection, until recently, like I wanted to have every single piece, which is pretty wild thing to do. And still kind of wild as we move forward. But, um, this has kind of been the only way to afford it.
Every single, it's like there's an old Saturday Night Live skit with this big semi truck backing up to somebody's house and it's going, every record ever recorded. Yes, if you order now, you can get every record ever recorded delivered straight to your
Right.
doorstep.
But
Um,
there are definitely some pieces that have skyrocketed that have come down.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, when I was speaking earlier about the Argonaut, like the Argonaut was selling for like $2,500. They were, the new one came out and it cut it in about half.
Wow.
And you're noticing too with, their reimagining of all these new, by all these companies. It's great for people that are coming in now that missed out on a lot of stuff because a lot of people are selling off a lot of the premium format sideshow line to get the Prime One. You're seeing like tons of collections going up for sale because they don't have the money to, and
No,
also
I have those.
and
You're right.
also and also the fact too, like who needs two massive Saurons, or who needs, some people aren't into having, two or three or four of the same character. So you're noticing that uh depreciating a lot of the, those pieces that were like grails are going to start to come down a little bit. I'm sure at some point they might elevate back up, but initially now there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 Argonauts on eBay, where before you would see one every year, maybe at like
Right.
25 or 2600.
Right, and you're right, because people are selling off their old ones because they're making room for the new one that's coming.
Exactly. So it's good for the collectors, the older collectors, or I mean the newer collectors that, are coming into the market. Maybe they, weren't able to find the first one, for a long time, and now they have an opportunity to get it. And then if you had it and you bought it initially for $199, $1,300 doesn't sound too bad anyways.
That's
And
right.
it'll definitely buy you the new one.
There you
So,
go.
there's deals out there to be had, it just, you got to take the time and, you got to buy when situations like this are happening, when people are essentially liquidating big collections. Like you go on the Facebook page, some of these Facebook pages, you're seeing massive collections, 50, 60 piece plus collections going up for sale that I mean, 2-3 years ago, this wouldn't happen very much. You're seeing multiples in every month going up for sale.
Well, I think some of that is people get you see it a lot where people get you know like they talk about like in the Hobbit where they get basically gold fever,
Yeah.
dragon sickness,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they buy a bunch of pieces, even if it's over 2 or 3, 4 year period. They'll buy a bunch of pieces, build a beautiful collection, custom cabinets, and all that kind of stuff, and then they'll burn out. Something happens, and they liquidate collections. It's like, holy crap, that's an amazing collection. But sometimes with people, you can see it coming when they start buying stuff right out of the gate in a certain fashion. You can do that. Talking about being able to, even up to recently. I mean, when the original Lord of the Rings line came out, you could. I mean, what's funny is you look at the price now, and we'll get into this just a second, and kind of how we judge some of these collectibles with their prices and edition sizes and stuff. The original statues, the 6 scale stuff was 125 for the smaller guys, for the smaller normal characters. You'd get a piece like Saruman that was 150 because it came with the Palanthir and the stand that it was on. Then you had pieces like the Cave Troll and the Balrog. They were $300, and their edition size Balrog was what, 1K, and the Cave Trolls what, 750, and they're $300 when they came out. So that was pretty expensive back then. But it's you could have, if you had, depending on what your funds were, that you could have gotten the entire Sideshow Weta line over the time period that those movies were out, had every piece. And there were people that did. I at one time had almost all of them myself. You could have done that. Now you just can't do that. I mean, like I said, the ones that I wrote down, I have most of those, but the price point on them is to where you just simply can't. You have to pick. You have to look at the piece and decide what's the price, can I afford it, and is the value of owning that piece, what that part means to me in the story, that character, that sequence, whatever. Is it worth it spending $1,200-$1,300 for a statue or whatever? Because that's just where we're at now. As far as like I said, the original Sideshow Weta line, I think obviously that's the granddaddy of where everything started. But I think we as collectors now, especially newer collectors, want, where they're looking at some of the edition sizes and stuff and everything. They're like, oh, you'll see, and this is kind of where I wanted Jay to be here, because he likes smaller edition sizes, and I'm not picking on him or anything, because I like the guy a lot, but I wanted him here because I know he's one of those collectors. He likes the smaller edition sizes and everything, and I think that's important to him. But like the original Balrog has a 1K edition size, and everything, and it's not a massive piece, so it's not it's not like the one Weta put out here just a few years ago that's really super huge, but it sold for $300, and people at the time were like, oh my god, it's one of the it took a while for it to take off, because people thought $300 back during that, when those were coming out, were like a ridiculous price to ask for a statue, and the edition size being 1K and stuff like that. Now we'd like, there's people like, shoot, sign me up for a statue with an edition size of 1K and at $300. Salmon Bill was 150. Its edition size is open. Like I said, Strider was 125, open edition size. So, like I mentioned a little bit ago, the Ring Wraith on Steed, he's like 275, 5K edition size. I think we look at those statues in some ways through rose-colored glasses and forget that people were saying things when those were coming out, that we're talking about now. I mean, the conversation is kind of just continual, and you can mark it on the calendar every time a piece comes out. And I think people forget that we look at that and go, oh, well, that was all wonderful. Well, back then that was considered super high. I mean, paying $125 for a statue was considered ridiculous, and now we pay for statues that are 10 times that amount. So, when we compare like Sideshow Weta to now, like I said, I think we look through rose-colored glasses.
Well, it's another part of the value question that you asked, Josh. If you think about that, a statue that used to cost 150 versus one that costs $1,000. It has the quality, the detail,
Mhm.
the appearance, the durability, whatever it is. Has that improved, or is it pretty much the same as it was? So if you look at and I have the original Salmon Bill because I'm a Sam guy, as we've talked about before. And so that was like one of the first things in my collection. And I didn't get it because of that kind of edition size. I got it because it was Salmon Bill for crying out loud. But it's a pretty simple piece compared to, Barad-dûr, which is back there, or even some of the other statues. So if you compare it to, Aragorn, another relatively earlier statue, Aragorn on Steed in his kingly garment. So it's the detail is an aspect of quality. The paint is an aspect of quality. So has that increased at all, or is it just people can charge more because they can charge more?
Well, I think, and Ben, chime in here in just a second. It has increased for sure, in both of those regards. Whether detailing, the sculpting, how they can sculpt, the paint, all that stuff. And so I think if people want, and sometimes I think people when they want, I mean, we obviously want everything to be cheaper so we can buy more. That's just the nature of us as consumers and collectors. We want more. But I think sometimes we forget, sure, we could probably get statues again for $125, but you're going to lose a lot of the detailing. The paint quality is going to decrease, back to the standards that we had back in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. And there's not a collector is being honest, that says, yeah, I want that kind. I mean, they don't want 2002 standard paintings on the statues, even though those statues that came out of the Sideshow Weta line are amazing and they look fantastic for what time period they came out of. No one's going to buy the next big thing from Weta if it's done with the standards of sculpting and painting and detailing and all that kind of stuff from 2002. They're just not. They're not going to do that. So if you want the things that they're able to do now with any of those statues that we've talked about throughout the night, you're going to have to ante up. That's just the fact of where things are at. So that's why, like I said, what got me in some ways with hot water with that discussion was like the stuff that Sideshow was doing, detailing and paint at that time was a step up from where things were at during the Sideshow Weta line. So you were going to pay more. Things are better now than they were then. You're going to pay more. So that's just how it is. Ben, where do you come down on that? Like as far as, just this particular topic that we're on right at the moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, the materials are definitely getting improved. I mean, like you said, like the advancement from the Sideshow Weta to the Sideshow line, they went to the premium format, added different fabrics and materials. And I mean, now I've already pre-ordered the Infinity Studios half-scale Legolas, which has silicone face. I mean, you're talking like we're entering into, even higher, it just keeps progressing. Obviously the values raise, but I mean, obviously that's a much larger scale than we've seen before too.
Right.
So I think, I think definitely the value is there because the quality is heavily. I think that might be the best looking statue I've ever seen. That's from Lord of the Rings. That Infinity Studio.
That is pretty
That
amazing.
Legolas is pretty.
I mean, obviously we haven't seen it in person yet, but it's amazing how lifelike it looks to Legolas.
Yeah.
And it looks like they may do.
I did pictures on Sideshow's site.
What?
Yeah,
I know it's insane. I've checked it out. Like I got the video. I've seen. I keep watching. I'm like, you just notice so much more every time I see it.
It's crazy.
And I think that's we're entering in a whole new era. Like I talk to so many collectors that I talk to regularly, and it's just like we're gonna have a quarter scale line that's gonna be rolling out.
Well, and that is what's happening. So if you think about the manufacturers, what they're doing is that they're expanding the price points back to your price.
Yeah.
And so they are heading toward the top end, a half scale, literally lifelike Legolas, all the way to the lower end kinds of things. Like what Weta has been doing with their various vinyl figures, their mini epics, or their figures, fandom kinds of things. So the mini epic, about a $50 price point. The figures of fandom, again, a poly sort of or a vinyl kind of an approach. You're going to have $120 price point, all the way up to these really, really detailed pieces. But even some of the more classic pieces are still at that 100 to 150. And so if you build a line, it's kind of like a car company. You can buy the Corolla, or you can go all the way up to the Avalon if you're buying a Toyota, and then you can go to the Lexus line, and that's just within one car company.
Well,
so
to use your example, I bought a car back in April. I bought a 2021 Trailblazer RS, and it's the in-between model for them. And ultimately, I paid about $34K for it. I could have gotten a regular Trailblazer and paid probably $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 less. I could have gotten the next one up and paid more. Or I could have upgraded all the way to the Blazer. And there was one on the lot actually the day that I went in to talk to the dealership, and I think it was $57,000. So. I mean, it's just like you said, Weta is, especially Weta, because they do have a line, but collecting Lord of the Rings in general, there is becoming a spectrum of things you can collect. If you want to do, smaller stuff, you can do the pop vinyls, or you can do the mini epics, or if you want to go a little bit higher than that. Actually, I don't want to leave Diamond Select out. They have the action figures that they're doing. You have what Osmos is doing with they're coming out with those mini statues, which are going to look, I think, absolutely amazing when they come out. And the Balrog is the first one, so I'm getting that one. They have the 6-scale figures. They even have a series within those, like the Gold Crown Gandalf and stuff like that. You've got what Weta's doing with the classic series. You've got the premium line. You've got the Master Collection. Stephen Saunders and John Howard, they're teaming up for a statue line of stuff that are like quarter scale or whatever. Then you've got Prime One that's doing like whatever size their stuff is. Their stuff's kind of like just in between-ish scale, but there's a spectrum of stuff. So if depending on what your budget allows, you have your price points that you can hit. Then you get into, does it have an edition size? How much does that mean to you subjectively? And what is the value of that character and that type of collectible? Like I said, to me, action figures I judge differently versus a statue. And so you just have to determine value-wise how you view that. So
and you're going to have that whole spectrum. You can go on Weta today and buy a master swordsmith version of Orcrist for $13,000.
Mhm.
And there's, a limited edition of 25. So there are very few people kind of what is acknowledging it that are going to be, ponying up the price of a cheap used car for, a master swordsmith collection.
Yeah, don't commit a crime with those either. It's going to be really easy to narrow people down. There's only like 25 people that it could possibly be.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. But so it's an interesting question. If you think about some of these figures, will we see a $13,000, edition of 25 piece coming out of, pick your favorite character?
As long as it's not a Balrog, I can say no.
That's right. If so there you go, Josh. You have a $15,000 Balrog.
And my parents would hate me. Would hate me a lot. So
and maybe we'll throw in Gandalf at that price too. Little face off.
I'll put him in my backyard. Neighbors will freak out. They'll be like, "What the hell's going on down here?" No. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, and taking it to, like I said, with the Sideshow Weta line. I think you have to just adjust how you have to look at things and how we look at things then versus now. Because I mean, during the Sideshow Weta line, all you had was just that. That was basically it. I mean, Toy Biz obviously had the figures, but if you weren't, I mean, really, to be honest with you, if you weren't buying the Toy Biz figures, you were buying the statues. Those were basically your choices, I think. I don't remember. Maybe there were other stuff. It's been 20 years, people. I've slept a couple of days. I don't remember everything. I'm sorry. So you have that, and then you have obviously Weta doing their own thing, and we talked about them and the spectrum that they have. I wanted to talk about, and we haven't gotten to them yet. I want to talk about Prime One a little bit because they're an interesting new group to collecting Middle Earth, and where I want to try to tie them in a little bit to what we've talked about tonight. It's just my point of view. With where I look at them at, and kind of them being the hot shiny new toy. No pun intended, since we're talking about collectibles. But none of their pieces are what I would call cheap. If you're just looking at from a pure price perspective. Like I said, I got told Ben before the show, I want to get the Balrog versus Gandalf. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to get it from who I want to get it from. So I may need some help from him and other collector friends if they find someone that's got one for sale, or a place that's got one for sale, and that it can be bought, and they're reliable people to buy them from. And I don't care if I get which version, because there's two versions. There's an exclusive version where you can change the hand out from a whip to the sword. Only the sword hand lights up with the Balrog. The exclusive is $13.99, so it's an extra $100 for the switch out hand. Or the regular version is $1,299. So pretty. Neither one of them is what you would call cheap. If people when people want to talk about price just as a value, as a number. The edition size, and this is where I think people, where I look at edition sizes differently maybe than some collectors, is the total edition size between the two for the Balrog is 1,300 pieces for essentially the same piece. It's a switch out hand. It's not dramatically different enough where I'm like, oh, that's 1,300 total Balrogs from Prime One that'll be out there. Yeah, you can switch out the hands. And I think sometimes we want to hammer, because Weta's been around for a couple of days, and I'm using them as an example. Like Bilbo and Baggin, like I said, when it came out, 1,046, it was that 2-week window, and like, oh, it's 1,046, and there were people like, it's too high, I'm not going to order it now. For 1,046, and like I was telling Ben, to me, I look at that number and go, that's really not that bad. Maybe it's because I've been collecting for as long as I have, and I can remember the Ringwraith on Seed having a 5,000 piece edition size, or like I've mentioned, Sauron and the Morgul Lord from them when the Return of the King went really crazy, and people just went bat poop crazy on ordering stuff. 1,300 pieces for Prime One, and they make great stuff. I want that piece. I'm not knocking it, but 1,300 pieces is bigger than 1,000. and it's like there's a pass given, and I think that that's where I think edition size and price and value, and I think that to me personally, this is kind of where this topic came from, is I think that's where it's subjective. Like we'll hammer one company for doing something, but we're giving another company a pass. And realistically, the edition sizes aren't that different. I don't think 1,300 pieces is that big of edition size. It's an awesome piece. People want it. It's a wanted character. It's a wanted sequence. 1,300 pieces makes sense. The Aragorn from them, which I would also like to get because it's pretty cool. Is basically $1,000 piece for both versions. 600. It actually is tiny, really, when you add the both together. 650 piece edition size total for the two. It's really small for some reason. Sauron from them, which is shipping right now as well. I've seen a few people get it. I will say this: that one is massive. Ben, did you get that one?
I have it, but I don't have it displayed yet because I haven't
displayed yet. It's in, from what I've seen in the pictures, the freaking thing is huge. It comes in like what, 3 boxes or something like that.
It's 2 massive boxes.
And the exclusive is $13.99. The regular is $12.99. The edition size between the two is 1,500 pieces. Again, I don't think that that's bad. And I think
So the regular is only 500 versus the exclusive is 1,000. Is that?
Unless I wrote it down wrong. Yeah, the exclusive, because the exclusive comes with a big size ring. I mean, it's like a massive ring. And it's got a bunch of goodies with it. And Prime One does some really kick-ass stuff. I'm not knocking them at all. They do some great stuff. But where I look at it from a collector that's been around for a couple of days, and I think I see this from newer collectors. And again, this is one of the reasons why Ben's been around for a bit. You've been around for a bit. I've been around for a bit. This is kind of where I wanted Jay to have like a guy that's been around only for, when you look at collecting in dog years, he's only been around for like a day, and he's got a really fresh, new collector perspective. And that I wanted him to be able to speak to, like, how does he view the two? Because like I said, for me, and I want you guys to speak on this in a minute. I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded. We're like, why do you guys think this, or do you see this? I mean, Ben might see this more than you do, Jim, because I don't know how much you know about Prime One and what they're doing. And so do you guys think that maybe Weta is getting, because they've been around for a while, they've been the only player in the game for a long time now, so to speak, being given a pass versus Prime One, in that particular, we're in like the price, and especially the edition size, how that's looked at, value type thing, because, or am I completely off in that my view of, like combining the edition size, or should you look at it just one statue, like the exclusive Balrog edition size being 600 is really tiny individual statue, or how do you guys view that? I'm curious. I'll let you guys fight to the death on which one of you wants to go take that one first.
Well, I mean, it's hard to compare what Weta's doing and what these guys are doing. And I only say that because, Weta really is sticking with the 1/6, which whatever, that's their license agreement or whatever. And these are quarter scale. So obviously, the price is going to be a little bigger because the piece is a little bigger.
Right.
And I think, they're all pretty much doing the same kind of order system where they don't depict the edition size till the orders start coming in. And then I think, I think that they just depicted it based on, some accumulative amount of information they've got, like over the course of the first couple months. They're like, okay, we're going to make 1,000 of this, 500 of that, whatever the numbers are. So, I mean, there's no real window here. Cause I mean, Prime One's Dark Sauron's been available for 2 years and it's still available for sale on their site.
Yeah. That's where I was getting the information. The regular is sold out. The exclusive, you can get it. They said there's like 100 of them left or something.
Yeah. Low stock. I mean, I ordered it from them, You know, but you know, the thing is now too, like, I mean, this isn't really about price and edition. It's just the amount of stuff you have to deal with when ordering one of these big pieces. Like, it's just crazy, man. These boxes are so huge. And then the shipping costs. Like, that's something else that has to be really thought about nowadays. Because you know, before I didn't even care about shipping costs. Like, it would be $100 or less, no matter what it was, no matter, you know, pretty much.
Right.
And now, like, you know, I bought this direct from Prime One before I switched to buying it from retailers in the United States, and it was $300.
And that's why I said for the with the Balrog, why I didn't order that piece from Prime One Direct, because the shipping was
Yeah,
several $100s. It was, basically what you could buy a whole statue for. I'm like, the statue was, I had no problem paying. God, again, this goes into where you're willing to work towards now and where you worked your mind. I was willing to pay the $1,300 for it, but I wasn't willing to pay $300 for on top of shipping. And now you're talking $1,700 or so
yeah,
for it. I was like, I can't do that with what I know I might want to get from Weta. I'm also having to base that because we're in anniversary years. They're doing very special, large scale pieces. That's why, as Ben, for those of you watching earlier, was talking about the amount of stuff Weta put out in the last year that cost so much. It's they're having talked with them, they're going guns a blazing with what they wanna get out, things that they've sat on and not made for years or whatever, or doing special versions. And so yeah, the shipping on it, Jim, I don't, how much do you pay much attention to what Prime One's doing, or do you mostly just focus on like Weta and stuff?
Up to this point, I have not. And my reasoning is that they are not putting out figures that I tend to buy.
Right.
I don't, I tend to go more on the heroes than the villains side of the equation. So Lurtz and the Balrog and Sauron, they're great figures, but candidly, it's not just limit of budget, it's limit of space. I'm at the point, I'm going to have to kick my son out of his room and say, go get your own apartment, son. It's time. So in order to expand into something else, or talk my wife out of her sewing room, which is never going to happen. So that's kind of where I have to be more selective. And so for me, a half size or a Legolas, it's not, I don't care. He's not, but if they came out with a half size Sam, well, obviously I'm getting that. So and again, it's the personal aspect of what it is. And I'm not like Ben. I'm not trying to buy everything because I don't have the room to buy or the budget to buy everything.
Well, and that's why I think, like I said, with where I think, because Prime One is kind of new to the scene doing Lord of the Rings, I think we as collectors are looking at them a little bit differently, judging them a little bit differently because they're new. So the feeling of value is slightly different, and especially to newer collectors, I think they look at it differently because they're like Ben said, with the spectrum of stuff that you can get. Or I'm sorry, Jim, you said that and everything, but they're entering at a price when they're going, that's what I want. They're not going to start with the 1/6 or the action figures, like Ben did, or start with the 1/6 like you and I did. They're going straight towards that. So for them, they look at those pieces with the value of, hey, I may pay $1,600 with the shipping for the Balrog, and the value of that is better to me because it's doing more that I want. And so they have to remember, well, that's where you're focused at, where your collection at. So again, it's a kind of one of those PSA type things. Be kind to your fellow collector. Remember the value you see in that big piece. There's maybe a collector that sees the same value in, say, the Bilbo at Bag End, which, while it's a big piece, it's not a quarter scale piece. It's not, like the Sauron that Prime One put out. So that's why I wanted to, like I said, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. So I kind of wanted to talk about, like, just with some friends that I enjoy chatting with and everything, like how value and price point and edition size is looked at through those, because it's the same topic over years and years, but it changed based on the time period and how we view things. Because as you said, Jim, there's such a spectrum of collectibles now that that's why the value to me, as I said at the beginning, is so subjective. There are
Yeah.
people that buy the Funkos that, man, they love those freaking things, and that is their jam, and the value is high. And I look at them and go, those are cute things that I might decide I want to mix into mine. But if I, if one says, oh well, it's $150 for that pop, okay, see ya, but someone else is like, I want that. Where, they'll go on back in was expensive, and I'm like, yes, please, and they're like, no. So
The other aspect of the Prime One thing is that they are building on the ecosystem that the sideshows and the Wettas and the UCs have built.
Mhm.
And so, the reason that they can go to the price point that they're going is because other price points exist.
yes,
And so, and there's this trade up factor, it's kind of like what Ben was describing. At some point, you go ahead and you cross the line, and I'm willing to pay that, four figures for that thing, where I would never have done that 5 years ago. And so, and in the same way as that's happening at the individual level, it's happening at the overall collection level. And that's what Prime One would not exist without those lower price point things.
Right.
Or they might, but it would be very eclectic. But now, because of this mass market that is, or the large market, and all of its complexities and price points, they can pick their spot. And I'm going to go and create my own unique offering or value and offer it out there and see who's going to gobble it up. The other thing that all these players have to think about is, what's the staying power? The Lord of the Rings has been an amazing franchise, and it still seems to have legs. So, is there a, what would those stuffed animal things? What am I thinking of? The
Beanie Babies.
Beanie Baby. Is there a Beanie Baby moment? So everybody was stockpiling those puppies, and now they're pretty much all worthless except for maybe a couple, four of them.
right.
I don't think that'll happen. And as you said, Josh, we're kind of in this anniversary round, and there is an amazing staying power. I still can't believe that we haven't had, this is an aside, a 20th retrospective like the Harry Potter people got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the Rings people.
Mhm.
So maybe
Yeah,
something.
that's been a complete missed opportunity that there hasn't been hasn't been done.
Maybe
But
we'll see that with the Return of the King 20th.
Right.
It won't be
Hopefully.
us, but who knows? But so it gets into that sort of staying power, and it's the hope of all of us collectors that someday I'm going to keep checking those decipher cards that I still haven't gotten yet, and maybe they'll have fallen in a price and become affordable for that foil set that I'm still missing. But not so far. There's still staying power of this thing. So part of the equation that you have to fold in.
well, one thing you said a minute second ago too that I think is that with like Prime One doing what they're doing specifically, they're able to look at the market and go, well, Osmus is doing 6 scale stuff. I mean, that's their spot. I mean, they're doing the smaller statues, but their spot for the most part is the 6 scale action, the 6 scale, figures, action figures. I don't know what I want to call them action figures, but the 6 scale figures. Weta's obviously kind of in that 6 scale statue, slightly a little bit bigger. Obviously, I mean, you get the stuff like Treebird that's just absolutely ridiculous in size and stuff like that. But for the most part, they stay in that 1/6 realm of things. So there was no quarter scale because Sideshow's not doing Lord of the Rings stuff anymore. So they were smart. They looked at it and said, "Where's our market? Oh, we do some really awesome bigger statues with Marvel and DC and whatever." They're able, and they go, "We're going to do that." And so they were able to get the license to do that, and they were smart because there is a market for that. You were talking about um, people and how and you guys were talking about how people upgrade and do stuff. And the guy that I talked to, he's the recipient of somebody else doing that. They're selling some of these premium format Lord of the Rings statues, and he's buying some of them and the person he's buying from is upgrading to like the Prime One stuff and everything, and getting some of the Master Collection type statues. So people are doing that. They're upgrading. So those pieces are moving on because they're looking to upgrade from what was cool in quarter scale 10 years ago, 12 years ago when Sideshow was doing them, to what's cool in quarter scale now, which is what Prime One's doing. So people are doing that. Ben, what do you think about, like, just in general with like Prime and you know, all that kind of stuff with them, and how they're judged versus other companies currently and stuff like that?
Well, I don't know. You know, there's so limited information and pieces available. I mean, there's only a few people in the United States that have both the Balrog and the Sauron,
Right.
and it's only people that have essentially ordered directly from Prime One. Most of the people that have ordered from the other retailers haven't even gotten Sauron yet, and I just got Sauron maybe, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. I haven't put them together, even taken them out of the box, but so there's such limited information, so I think it's hard to really state. But from what I've heard from most people that have had it, they're pretty happy with the quality, and they haven't had too many issues with that. But I think, you know, as someone that likes bigger pieces personally, I'm excited because with the half scale line that Infinity Studios is coming with, they've already depicted that they're going to make the full Fellowship,
Yes.
and they've, you know, it looks like Sam's coming
On,
with.
Oh, buddy.
Well, have you seen that, Jim?
no, I haven't.
They don't have them, you know, they don't show the full figure, but they show like the outline of it, and it
Oh, yeah.
looks like Sam is fighting Shelob in the depiction. It looks like it's going to be absolutely an amazing piece. So, but I mean, that's what I, you know, until now, you know, if you wanted the most complete and thorough line, the only option was Sideshow Weta.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously Weta's been catching up, and they've made a bunch themselves. But, you know, there was no larger scale where you could even have the whole Fellowship. So that's something I'm excited about personally, is the fact that we're getting to a point where there'll be an actual large scale full Fellowship line, and hopefully more.
Right.
Because no other manufacturer has done that yet.
No. The only time the Fellowship has actually been done with every member, unless I'm wrong, and again, if you're on the message board or the comments section or Facebook, you're more than welcome to tell me I'm wrong, because it happens. Is that little mini set of statues that Weta did, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, however long
I
ago.
got them. Yeah.
And they did, you know, did them in the 3 parts.
In one scene, you're saying?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's it.
We're like, they all come from a similar sequence, or they're in their Fellowship gear. When I say Fellowship gear, I mean Fellowship of the Ring before they, you know, before they went into Moria gear.
Right.
Not
south of Rivendell, they're walking.
Yeah. That gear, that's the only time, because nobody else has done them. Sideshow got within Sam and Mary or not Sam and Mary, Mary and Pippin of doing actually completing the Fellowship, and at least having all 9 characters made, and at least where you had all 9. And they stopped right then, and I've heard that the statue was very cool looking, and that there's in a box somewhere in the Indiana Jones sideshow where there is a prototype. So one got made. Some way people have seen it, but since
you're not talking like the Weta mini epic line, where you obviously do have each of the Fellowship.
Right, the mini epics. Right, the mini epics. I think they've done everybody now, where there is, you know, and as far as that kind of style, and I'm sure
everybody and some, so they've got even supplemental.
Right, and I think Funko. Oh gosh, Funko's probably done everybody by now.
Yeah.
But Weta hasn't done all 9 members of the Fellowship. There's no Sam statue, not since they've done the solo stuff, is there?
No.
So they haven't done him.
There's a slideshow piece of Sam and Frodo.
Right.
Mordor.
They haven't. Weta hasn't done a solo Frodo piece, right?
Well, there's a Weta. This was a San Diego Comic-Con piece with Sam carrying Frodo.
Right. I'm talking more since Weta got the original.
Oh, there's no solo Frodo piece.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's that. There's the little diorama piece, but since Weta got the line back, and to do 6 scale statues and slightly bigger now, obviously, by themselves, they've done Aragorn, they've done Boromir, um, they've done
Now,
Legolas and Gimli.
there's Frodo and the Nazgul on Weathertop.
Well, Frodo, there is Frodo in the Ring Wraith. Yes, that is true. Yeah, I forgot about that one. There is that.
Well, then you have Gandalf on cart with Frodo.
Right, that's true.
But solo, there's but all the hobbits, once Escape of the Road comes out, will all be done in the Master Collection line.
Right.
And Frodo's been done, and then also you're gonna have Frodo will be done twice, and then Merry and Pippin will be done twice because they're on Treebeard as well.
On Treebeard, but individually they haven't, right?
Individually there hasn't been.
I'm trying to think. I'm like spinning the numbers in my head. So Weta's got, again, when you're talking, those are characters now. I will tell. I mean, talking about price and value and how even how companies look at them. I have been told by people that one of the reasons you don't see the hobbits individually is they don't sell. They've never sold well. So I've been told this I can say this now, I guess, because I've been told this information a long time ago, and I'm not going to say who told me because, you keep secrets, as far as that kind of stuff. But I've been told by folks at Sideshow over the years, and I've been told by people at Weta that the hobbits tend to struggle.
Well, it's interesting because the Escape from the Road sold out
right
fast in ways that Randall never did.
Right, and I think
you got to put them in the right.
Right, and I think that's the key, and I think maybe that's what they're realizing. Because obviously Sideshow doesn't have Lord of the Rings anymore. But I think Weta is realizing that in order to produce Hobbit statues, they have to be in a sequence where it's almost like a diorama type piece.
Yeah, and so
the Witch King,
here you go,
Treebeard, Escape off the Road. They have to be with somebody else because the data, and like I said, I'm not giving away secrets. This isn't like, this isn't secret scroll information. So I'm not, hopefully going to upset anybody. But they've said that those characters struggle to sell individually speaking, and I think that's why I think when you see a Frodo piece, not a Frodo piece, but a Sam piece individually from Weta, I think Weta will do either a premium statue or a master collection statue of Frodo of Sam fighting Shelob. I think when you get him, it will be done like that because I think it will sell.
Well, and so that's the thing. It's the nature of the hobbits. A hobbit just standing around is unnoticeable. It's a hobbit, for crying out loud. It's one of the things that attracts people to the Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien translated this sort of epic thing that was the Silmarillion into something that was actually approachable. Right. So if you're going to have, you can have heroic figures, elves, or heroic men like Aragorn or Boromir. And that, that'll be great. You got to put Hobbit into something. So I guarantee you, if you had a diorama of the Witch King and Eowyn and Merry stabbing the Witch King in the back of the leg, that Merry statue is going to sell. Mm-hmm. If you've got Pippin, I'm not sure where to put Pippin. Maybe he's climbing and lighting the beacons or something. But if you put him in an action scene, then this is going to be more attractive. Or, or Sam fighting Shelob. Frodo's a little more challenging, honestly. Tolkien himself said that Frodo's not as interesting a character, which is a pretty fascinating thing to say about your, main protagonist. Other characters are developing more, and so, and I think that translates into what people are interested in and the scenes I want to see and why I associate with a particular character.
Well, I think that like I said, I think you're hitting the nail on the head when it comes to perceived price and value. Yeah. Forget edition size to characters like the Hobbit, right. Hobbits, I should say, in that the original Sideshow Weta line, Sam and Bill was, an open edition size piece, and from the edition size is tiny. I mean, it's an open, but it's not a big open edition. I mean, it's very small. Uh, Frodo was kind of the same way. Sam was the same way. Pippin didn't get done until Return of the King, and then people aren't necessarily in love with it because it looks like he's scared out of his mind and stuff. He wasn't in his Hobbit clothes and everything. So, and I don't remember it selling very well. But like I said, I think Weta has found the way to correct and put value in a way where people look at it and are willing to pay the price for Hobbit characters by putting them in scenes like the Ring with the Witch King on at Weathertop and Treebeard and Escape Off the Road and stuff like that, because they're part of a scene, not just the central figure, because it's hard. I mean, like, I think Sam and Bill's a perfect sequence. I think that's a beautiful statue, and everything, and it's a very Hobbit statue, but it doesn't necessarily if that it maybe even then, because like I said, it didn't sell particularly well from what I understand. But with the way collecting is now, you do that statue now, it's not going to sell well at all because there's just nothing going on. It's a very Hobbit statue, and I think people would look at it and go, "Oh, they want $700 for that." There's no value there because there's nothing going on.
Yeah, and so it's a niche statue versus a popular statue.
Right.
It leads to edition size. It leads to perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
And candidly, there are some of these products that get offered and then hit a wall. So I'm still ticked, for example, about the whole. I got a whole shelf over here that's gathering dust with the Dol Guldur diorama, the 1/30th scale thing, I've got acres of space just waiting for more of these figures to show up, and none of them are.
Yeah, and I don't know that line's ever going to get done because it just didn't take off.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you don't know what's going to take off.
And that happens to collectors where while you have to be careful when you're collecting, and this is more from a price conversation, when you're spending your money, be careful what you're putting your money into, because if you as you said, you like that line, you like that scale, probably not going to be any more from it. So now what do? Is it worth keeping those pieces, or do you look to sell them off to somebody else because that line's not going to go any further? Do you want just that little bit of that sequence, and not get like Radagast and his bunnies and some of the other stuff, or more scenes from either film? Yeah, I mean that's the thing when you're buying statues, you have to determine from a price perspective. Are you picking and choosing? Are you all in with everything, or what? Because that's going to obviously impact and where and how you go with things. Do you gentlemen have anything else? Got any other thoughts you'd like to share?
We've been talking for a couple hours again.
I always feel like, and obviously we're still recording, so I'll say this while we're recording. I always feel like maybe it's because I'm a school teacher and I'm used to just talking all day. That I do a lot of talking, and like I have to make sure I'm not getting too long-winded and creating a lecture. You guys aren't here for that, so I have to remind myself in the back of my head, click over every once in a while and make sure the students in the class are participating in the discussion too. So, and with this kind of a topic, I think we did okay with that. So, do you guys have any final thoughts?
Just buy what you love, buy what you can afford, and if it looks like it's a limited edition, you might have to move faster than you want, but you'll probably do better if you do.
Ben, you got anything for us on the way out the door?
No, just thanks for having me again. I had a lot of fun. I always enjoy talking with you guys, and I mean, if it's about Lord of the Rings and collecting, I mean, I'm in. If you guys need me around, I'm available. I love it.
This is not the last time that we'll be somehow stealing your evening, so you can count on that to come back. So we, as I said last time, thanks for coming on and joining us and adding another perspective to it, because I think, like I said before, I think that that's important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get Jay on here to hear, like I said, a new collector's perspective on this particular topic, because it's, like I said, it's very subjective. It's one of those topics that, because he's newer, he's going to have some very different point of views than the rest of us, and everything. So for those of you watching, obviously, thank you for watching this. Thank you for watching the other two. As we've said before, I don't know how often these will happen. Life, holidays, health, all that kind of stuff. It varies. So when they pop up, thank you. Thanks for watching the reviews when we put those up. Your support for theonering.net and collecting, the collecting community in general. It really means a lot, because it means we get to talk about stuff like this, and talk about whether or not, something from Weta is, got value or price, or something from Prime One or whatever. So make sure, you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Make sure, this gets around, so people have a chance to voice their thoughts, and these companies hopefully will see them, and things will continue to add cooler and cooler stuff out there. So, just thanks for checking this out. We appreciate your support, like I said, and until the next one, we'll see you then. Review wise, I've got to do the Iron Studios Cave Troll. I've had that for a while. I need to get that done. I just got the Classic Series Galadriel. Got some stuff coming from Osmus. So I got a few things. Got the build, obviously the stuff from Weta, that's kind of gotten delayed, I think, because of obviously all the shipping stuff. But you've got, there'll be plenty of content collecting wise from us here at the winring.net. And like I said, until the next time, guys, thanks for all your support. Later.